and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. I'm joined by a man who I believe deserves a promotion. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I'll take that over a relegation.
You technically then be my boss, right? Instead of us being 50-50 on DSS.
That is correct.
Yeah, so I didn't mean what I said.
All right, that's fair.
We're
Verbal commitment, 1% ownership stake.
Yeah, there we go.
In your face.
There we go. So today's show is all about promotion, relegation. We've kind of, each of us has come up with a plan of how we think it could work, and we're going to sort of present it to each other, then answer some questions in a friendly way, right?
I'm just going to scream. That's it.
You're going to bomb my plan, right?
Yep.
And what we're hoping is to sort of have a big conversation about pro rel, right? So the big question is, why? Why do this, Taylor?
So a couple shows back, a couple weeks ago, a month ago maybe, we did a show basically where we kind of looked at all of the problems facing U.S. soccer.
Oh, I believe it was sometime after October 10th.
Yeah. Basically all the problems that have led U.S. soccer to be where it is. And then we kind of talked about maybe doing larger shows dealing with some of the issues specifically, the biggest one being kind of league structure from top to bottom in terms of U.S.
Opening
soccer's.
up the system, right?
Exactly,
Opening up the system. And we said, okay, that's a big topic. We can't deal with it right now. What we want to do is go away, put some thought into it, look at the various issues, and then do a whole show about it. And the time has come.
The time has come.
The time has come, Taylor. So why was it on our list to begin with? Why was sort of pro-rel / open system one of the things we thought was going to be helpful to, sort of growing soccer in America, but also improving the U.S. men's national team? Why are we even here?
First of all, because I think it is sort of, for lack of a better metaphor, it is the cloud that hangs over U.S. soccer. It is, right? It's the biggest conversation that you have to have when you're talking about how do you get more teams competing, how do you get more players involved, how do you keep them competing, how do you make sure that you've got quality leagues going in different parts of the country. It kind of all means you're talking about relegation.
And you can tinker with lots of other changes, but if you're talking about making changes to how soccer works in America, that's always the big switch that hasn't been flipped, right?
Absolutely. And with that in mind, I am going to try to flip it and say promotion relegation. I've already said relegation promotion twice, I think.
It doesn't matter, right?
It does not, but you teased me on it, so I'll conform, because that's what you should do when you're bullied. Just do what they say.
Me and some of our listeners, I will say. I think I have some backing on this.
Yes.
I'm good either way.
Right.
Ascending, descending, whatever you want to call it.
I appreciate that. But I think...
Or as Lucas Muller called it, uppy-downy?
Yeah, and that's what we're doing. But I do want to say that, we should probably add here that we are certainly not experts. I am not a contract law lawyer who knows all the ins and outs of what it will take to make promotion and relegation happen. But what we are is sort of interested parties who have a vested interest in U.S. soccer and the growth thereof.
Oh, because of the podcast.
Yeah, Daryl, the thing we've been doing for a while.
I thought you meant we've got a stake in the.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
We do the commentary for the kickers. That's the thing. But no, it's more about we talk about soccer 5 days a week, generally speaking. And so I think we want to know what's going on and how it could work and what the changes could be that it would allow for more success in the beautiful game.
Because we're big nerds, we didn't want to do it without researching, right? We didn't just shout our demands at each other. We wanted to go away, look into a few things. And really, I look forward to the idea of putting my thing down on paper and being like, okay, then what's the problems with it? And then we can try and fix them together, or you can raise them. Because I'll say my plan isn't perfect, right? I can't say that I've cracked. There's not like a eureka moment where I feel like, I've done it. I've split the atom. Send this to all the governing bodies, and I'll have to implement it straight away. I know there are problems, but I think there's some interesting things to talk about, and that's really what I'm into.
I absolutely agree, and I think to make it very serious, it's like the conversation about pro rel is the U.S. soccer equivalent of Israel-Palestine. In the sense that I think a lot of people keep getting involved, and it's always sort of like, I'm going to figure this out. There's an obvious solution to this. I've got it. And then you wait and you realize that there's just so much history and back and forth arguments and so many proposals put forth and so many ideas about how to make it happen that it becomes this okay, let me navigate all that. And then it just ends up you get kind of weighed down by it all. And I think what we want to try to do is not approach it with that. We've got the answers. We're going to figure it out. But more so we would like to see it happen. And so we want to think about how maybe we could make it happen.
Let's have the conversation.
Sure.
Right? We're not leading a movement. We're just having a chat. But the other thing is, I think we should talk a little bit about the reasons why it is so hard and why it is so complicated to do, and why you can't just flip a switch.
Sure.
One example being that soccer has failed a couple times, right? NASL went under. Major League Soccer has succeeded in putting a product on the field and on the television that has not gone belly up and failed, right? So far, MLS is the longest running, most successful league, and it's done it with a closed system. But because it's done it with a closed system, it has all these vested interests of people who want the safety of it being closed. So I think it's really worth talking about how if we're going to have a plan to do this, you've kind of got to address that, right? You can't just say, oh, we'll just make it 4 divisions, 20 teams in each, up and down.
Yes.
Right?
And then I think, like, going off of that, you've got other issues that like come into play would be, say, the fact that you've got these massive expansion fees now that you have to kind of navigate that because you've got clubs paying to have, like, you know, the right to be in Major League Soccer.
They bought into a particular system, right? So we've kind of got to find ways for them to buy into another system without feeling like they're being cheated.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing that maybe people would be familiar with from like an American sports landscape, especially if they are older, would be like mergers that have happened. You've got like the ABA merging with the NBA, AFL merging with, I think it was the NFL. I forget what it was.
I've seen semi-pro.
There you go. Yeah. But I think all of those come from...
We are both wearing knee pads with ice packs on them right now.
I mean, obviously. But I think all of those come from 2 leagues that, if not on the same level, like there is reason for both teams to want the merger to go through.
Right.
So with the ABA, you've got some star players that are starting to take away numbers and attendance, and you want to kind of make sure that you're the dominant force.
Right, and that's not the case with MLS, say, NASL. It's certainly not the case with MLS, USL.
No.
Right?
So you don't really
have a big brother,
that,
little brother relationship.
Yeah, so you don't really have anything that is really forcing your hand. I know people who are either big fans of NASL or big fans of Pro Rel would argue that there are reasons why you don't have that sort of rivalry that necessitates sort of a compromise. Not really what we're trying to get into, at least not right now, but that is a factor as well, that you don't really have anything forcing Major League Soccer to change.
True. Okay, the other thing I would like to raise is the issue of money and geography.
Yep.
The United States is gigantic.
I've heard.
Right? It's really hard to sort of, for example, if we were to like propose, let's have 4 divisions and they're all national and the best teams are at the top and the second best bunch of teams are in the middle and they all have to play all over the country, a bunch of teams would not survive. They just would not survive because this brings me to another issue, which is the state of American soccer, the financial situation, is not as healthy as it could or should be, right? You've got like, the Rochester Rhinos are taking 2018 off is one example. So it's not as if we could do this and expect that all the teams survive. So the way I think both of our plans, because we've had a little preview of each of our plans, right, just to see if we're on the same page or not. And I want to say our pages overlap slightly.
Sort of, yeah.
Is that we've taken that into account that it's not feasible for, say, Detroit City FC to suddenly travel all over the country. You know what I'm saying?
Like, yeah. And I think that then I've seen some people point out that but there are huge countries that do have promotion and relegation and do compete.
They've had soccer for a long time though, right?
Well, yes, but also like the main ones would be Russia, for example, where you've got a huge landmass. But then you look at kind of where the majority of the dominant teams in Russia are coming from, and it's Moscow and St. Petersburg. And even when you've got the outliers, like when you had Anji, all of their players were not all, but most
Roberto
of their players.
Carlos was there, and Samuel Eto'o was there,
all living in Moscow and like helicoptering in for training. Like you still kind of have everybody.
So we need a league of multimillionaires,
yes,
so they can all afford to travel on their own dime.
But it's basically like Russia is like most of those clubs are going to be based in specific areas that then you kind of don't. It's not as though they're completely spread around the country the way you will have with the United States because it's big and has lots of big cities.
And the other upside of what we're trying to accomplish here is to have a system that covers as much geographical ground as possible, like get as many teams as functional, successful on whatever level teams as possible, so that they can sort of be the thing that gathers up the talented young players and trains them up, right? So it's kind of in my head at least, my version is sort of a youth revolution as well, because you get more young players having access to professional soccer to train and play.
Because I think it's not
then
just
we win the World Cup.
Yeah, well, obviously that's how it works, which is kind of the goal. But it is the case, I think, for both of us that it's not just about the sheer volume of teams that you can have playing, because there are lots of teams that have played in USL and no longer do because it's just can be fly by night sometimes. So it's not about let's get every city in the country with a team and then it will all work out. Yeah. It's got to be a bit more structured than that.
Okay.
I'm not sure anybody is advocating that every city should have a team and then that's it. So maybe that was a little bit of a straw argument.
But this is kind of about easing into promotion relegation, at least with my plan and I think with your plan, right? Can we talk about maybe reasons why this might happen, before we really get into the details, reasons why this might happen?
Sure. And I'll say this, I would say for as long as I've really thought, given any intelligent thought to it, I've been pro-rel. I just don't necessarily
You want
think...
2 promotions to every relegation?
Yeah, of course.
Pro rel?
Yeah, I'm all about 2 steps forward, no steps back. 1 step back if you have to. But I think it's always been in my mind that it sort of isn't a thing that's going to happen. And I think that there are, even for like the reason we've talked about...
Because Don Garber keeps telling you that.
Yeah, but it's just even for reasons like we've talked about with flying cars, I think is the analogy I've gone with before about like, it's not necessarily the technology, it's all of the bureaucratic legal work behind it that with some of these expansion
and
fees...
the expense.
Yeah. I mean, like one point I saw made on Reddit was like that with the expansion fees, some of them come from taxpayer-funded, publicly funded funds, which kind of have a guarantee then that they'll be playing in the top flight. So if suddenly you're putting that at risk, you're going to have lawsuits all over the place.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's just been like, yeah, I would like it in theory, but I don't know what would ever allow it to happen. And so my approach has been, if we had an outside entity say, you have to do this, then what would we do?
So like if FIFA, say that there's the lawsuit right now, right? So if FIFA suddenly said, hey, we're going to sort of completely disown American soccer, national team can't come to the World Cup unless US soccer sets up some sort of promotion relegation system, then sort of the starting gun has been fired and we have to scramble and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
That's one scenario where this could happen.
Well, so could happen maybe, but at least for the purposes of my plan, what I am envisioning is a situation in which, much like for the United States to get the '94 World Cup, it was sort of like, okay, but you have to have the groundwork, the blueprints.
It's the carrot approach.
Yes.
So for the 2026 World Cup.
Basically, if FIFA were to say, you know what, we have this provision that you have to have relegation, promotion, relegation, and then they have this second clause that says, unless you have other framework in place, we're getting rid of that. If you want the 2030 World Cup, you have to have a system that has promotion, relegation.
So we could have the 2026 and the 2030 World Cup?
Well, just basically being like, in order to get 2026... by, say, 2030, you have to be sort of growing in that direction.
This is the same as you can have the 94 World Cup,
exactly.
But by 96, you've got to have a professional league operating.
There we are. That's how I've approached this. I'm not saying that is a thing that is likely to occur or even somewhat likely to occur, but it's what I've used to sort of have that owners then have to sort of consider this a bit more than they would otherwise. Because right now, I think if you're an owner of, say, NYCFC who just spent $100 million, you're not going to then be like, but sure, let's do this. You do have to have a little bit of a stick there.
There's also the idea that maybe a US soccer president could come in.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not name any names, but there's at least one candidate who said that, like, I think I could persuade the owners
Where Canalda?
that this is the way to go.
Okay.
Right? So essentially, you could have a situation where a presidential candidate makes the case as president that, hey, we should do this, let's all get on the same page, and makes it happen. I mean, that would be some remarkable coalition building, but it's not impossible.
No.
Okay, so we're imagining a world where this is kind of possible, and it's not imaginary. There's no unicorns. Here's my plan. Okay. So first up, I think to solve the financial aspect, this still has to be Major League Soccer.
I agree.
And what that means is you say to Major League Soccer, all right, you still get to be the brand, right? Everybody knows your brand. Major League Soccer is an established brand, but you got to open this thing up and have it an open system where teams can come in and get promoted and relegated. So I'm going to give you my divisional structure first.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
That?
Yeah, I'll take any questions that aren't why are you so stupid?
Because well, that was going to be number one, but since you've outlawed that one, I'll move on to my second. And mostly I'm asking this one because it kind of fits in with mine. Do you then still, like, for your second division, is that the NASL, or are you kind of getting rid of the other branding and it's just Major League Soccer and then subsidiaries?
I look at this as a merger of all leagues under Major League Soccer, and you keep the Major League Soccer branding because so here's another thing. A lot of people say that if we have an open system, then suddenly money will pour in. And I think that might happen. Some money might pour in. But I don't think you can guarantee that it's going to be this, like, what's the word, panacea that's just going to solve everything. I don't think it's enough money to make all the problems go away. You've still got to work really, really hard on making this a commercial success, right? It needs – ProRel won't suddenly flip a switch and all the money comes in. No. You've got to work hard to do it, right? Absolutely. So part of that, I think, is you take the best-known brand, Major League Soccer, and the people who dislike Major League Soccer right now, if it's made clear to them that this is a changed MLS, this is an open MLS, this is a different MLS, right? You don't have to do the Don Revolution dance to try and get an expansion team. You can get promoted through the leagues. Those people buy in. But also the sponsors like Target, they already have that relationship with Major League Soccer, right? So you get the joint sort of thing there. That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm with you. And then I think, I don't know if you would go this far, but I would say that, like, if you are going to try to establish promotion relegation, you have to have Major League Soccer on board.
Yes.
And I think if you're going
as you've got a rubbish system that's underneath that, you have kind of promotion relegation underneath that, and then MLS just exists separate differently, but they've got Giovinco. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so if you're going to get them on board, I think you have to make all the concessions you can to keep as many owners on board without having that sort of like threat of non-existence hanging over you. And so I think that is, with all the money that's been spent in branding and promotion and marketing to make Major League Soccer the most identifiable league in the country, I think you kind of have to keep them as that number one sort of like recognizable
and
brand.
they have the infrastructure, right? There's a bunch of offices, there's people that work there, there's MLSsoccer.com is already set up, the editorial staff, not just owning the domain. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So USL, NASL, any other leagues could be sort of sucked into that and just rebranded as MLS, okay? And then here's my big sort of divisional alignment plan. Division 1 is called MLS National. MLS National is Division 1. Right? I want to say about 16 teams in there, maybe 18 teams. So you have a slightly shorter season than right now. It's a single table. It's an absolute single table with a champion. You win the regular season, you are the champion. And then maybe the bottom 3 spots, the bottom 2 get relegated, and maybe the 2 above that have a relegation playoff against each other.
Questions.
Okay.
So when do you...
I feel like I want to describe the whole thing before you start peppering me with loads of questions. I'll take this one. I'll allow it.
It's mostly just because I think otherwise it's going to be a 14-page list of questions I have. But I'm just wondering, do you have an idea for when you would have this start?
I imagine giving it the whole thing maybe a 5-year head start for teams and leagues to all get set up.
So then it would
roughly
be conceivable by then that we would have 26 to 28 teams in the league?
Yeah, possibly. So at the beginning, there's going to be hey, you've got plenty warning, but 10 of you are getting relegated.
So the purge is real, basically, is what's happening.
It would be but can you imagine the ratings for the purge season?
So would it be that first season you drop... Or the season leading up to the first season, you would drop 10 teams?
I mean, if we have 26 teams and I'm going for a 16-team league, then yes. I'm negotiable on the numbers, right? But 16, 18.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, hear me out.
You're ruthless chairman, Daryl Grove.
The thing is, because it's all MLS, you're not getting cast out into the wilderness to wander the desert, right? Below MLS National, which is what I'm calling the top division, there is what I'm calling MLS East and MLS West. Each of those will have, 14 teams. So you've got 28 teams total there. And you have the Eastern Conference and Western Conference essentially, but MLS East and MLS West, to cut down on the amount of travel those teams would have to do, right?
Yep.
Okay, and the selling point for this division would be this is where all the promotion relegation happens. The reason I want to make it small, 14 teams, is because I want to have 3 spots at the top. So you say you're in the Eastern Conference, you win the Eastern Conference, you're definitely getting promoted to MLS National. Same for the Western Conference. So that accounts for 2 teams, right? Then you finish second or third in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. That's 4 teams go into a playoff at the end of the season. And then you play off till you get a playoff champion. Playoff champion takes the other third available promotion spot as the other teams come down.
Okay.
So there's a lot of promotion opportunity and lively season at the top of the table. At the bottom of both the 14-team tables, the very bottom of MLS East and MLS West get relegated to what's below, which I'll reveal in a minute. But then if you finish second bottom, third bottom, again, you have a playoff, but it's kind of a reverse playoff where if you lose, you go to the final. If you lose the final, you get relegated.
Yep.
Yeah.
And from experience, the top division in our amateur league did this one season, and my team was one of the ones that went to the worst final.
Drama?
But we ended up winning it. Actually winning it is I'm confused about the phraseology there, but it is a ton of drama, and it does feel like a cup competition in that game, because when you do score it, it's we're alive, hooray.
And the thing I'm really hoping for here is because of that, part of that playoff structure is to have that drama at the playoffs at the end of the season, but also because the top 3 spots essentially have a promotion aspect, the bottom 3 spots have a relegation aspect. It's only 14 teams, so there's 8 teams in the middle are kind of either edging towards one or the other. So you're in the second division, right? That's not as fun as being in the first division, but your season is always alive with drama. And the idea is to really expose fans, especially local fans, to the drama of promotion and relegation. That's the selling point for the league. That's how I'd pull sponsors in on that.
Yep, that makes sense to me. I would add that I do think when you, kind of going back to the initial conversation we had, when you talk promotion relegation and if it will ever happen, I think in Peter Wilt's manifesto, he talks about this. Yeah. I think if it were to happen, I think the most likely scenario is that you have MLS 1 and MLS 2, and then that's it. That's the closed system. And I think the reason why I don't love that and why I like yours a lot more is because with MLS 2, you still sort of have that same problem of if you have a terrible team in there, then they're just there the next season. Whereas with yours, you still have that incentive to succeed. Otherwise, you're going further down.
Yeah, exactly. So there'll be high drama in MLS East and MLS West as they try and get to MLS National or get relegated to, I haven't decided on the name yet. It's either called MLS Local or MLS Regional.
And this is where I remind everybody that you and I did not go to the VCU Brand Center. We do not have a background in branding and marketing. So
I do some copywriting.
But I'm just saying, like, we are open to interpretation when it comes to, like, what we want to avoid is, like, MLS 2 East. That gets a little bit more. MLS 2 East Local. Like, I don't know.
I'm going to call it MLS Local.
Sure.
And then you essentially have what I would think of as maybe conferences, like Northeast, Southeast, Southeast, Southwest, maybe Central North, Central South. So you have 6 conferences. And I'm thinking of this as an equivalent of like some of the NPSL leagues, maybe a little bigger and wider. And then that's a lot more flexible in terms of how deep you go within each conference. Like, so I would have like a Northeast administrator, and they can decide how big they want their top division to be and how many leagues below that you want to have a ladder, so that you really can go as deep as you want and teams can theoretically get promoted all the way up, right? So what I'm imagining then
Listeners, store that in your brain for when I tell you about my plan. Lots of similarities there.
So what I'm imagining is you have a champion of the 6 different regional conferences, right? And then they play off against each other. Maybe Northeast plays Southeast, and I'm really bad.
You could just do a round robin tournament,
or a round robin tournament. But you essentially have 3 sort of winners from the 6 champions, and those 3 go up to replace the 3 relegated MLS East and MLS West teams.
All right. So we should probably talk a bit more about the structure and the actual like specifics of your plan. But first, maybe we should get to today's sponsor.
We should. I'm just going to say we're going to get to geography when I get back, because I know some people will be thinking, well, what if the East and West is unbalanced? The answers are coming after today's sponsor.
That works. But today's sponsor is Roughneck Scarves.
Roughneck Scarves, makers of scarves for Major League Soccer, USL, NCAA, not NASL, but maybe if there's a whole new structure, then Roughneck can make the scarves for everybody.
Also the U.S. national team, so they've got lots of interest in this conversation, I would say.
So we put the question out today, Taylor. We always do this for Roughneck Scarves. We do. If you were to design a custom Roughneck Scarf, which is a thing you can do at roughneckscarves.com, with a theme of teams ascending and descending divisions, a.k.a. Pro/Rel, what would it look like? And we got some responses.
That we did. My friend Shreyas Ramani says on one side would be AFC Wimbledon climbing up a set of stairs. On the other side would be Charlton or Portsmouth falling down a set of stairs.
Oh, can I say congratulations to AFC Wimbledon? I didn't read the full story. Ryan Bailey, our friend Ryan Bailey, tweeted this out. That AFC Wimbledon have got planning permission and are about to go ahead and build a stadium in Merton. Go AFC Wimbledon.
And every time I see stories like that, I have to I almost have to do like the left-right thing that you do when you were a little kid, when you have to look and be like, okay, left is the one that makes an L. I'm sort of like Wimbledon, MK Dons, Wimbledon good. Got it.
AFC Wimbledon.
Yes.
Good. We should maybe talk to Ryan Bailey at some point.
That works.
About his Wimbledon experience. Up next, Jake says, I would put the crest of every team that Freddie Adu played for on the front and back of the scarf, signifying how quickly one can reach the top and fall back down to the bottom.
I would say reached like the middle. Kevin Chan.
Touch the top.
Yeah, sure. Kevin Chan says unicorns, rainbows, and dollar signs, since it will clearly give us all these things if implemented.
I detect a hint of sarcasm.
I think so.
Mazzy W says, on one side, it'd be the ghost of Leeds United rattling chains in warning to Newcastle. Is that a Christmas Carol reference?
I believe it is.
That's Marley, right? On the other would be Leicester wearing a Cinderella dress dancing with Jamie Vardy.
There's a lot of good literary references in there from, I'm assuming that's Mazikane Wagner, but I could be wrong.
Mazzy W.
Landon Cotham says, an artist rendering of Elon Musk's Mars colony to represent something cool that might happen in the future, but not anytime soon. That's a great one.
Patrick Blanton says, on one side are chevrons/arrows, those bike share things, pointing up with all the crests of teams getting promoted. The other is the same thing, but arrows down and teams who are going down. Both sides have the year on it, so it's less of a game day scarf and more of a hang it on the wall to remember going up or down. This is like each year has a pro-rel commemorative scarf of all the teams that went up or down. I like this idea. This is a winner.
The problem with this one, though, I'll say, is that when you get a scarf that is very cool looking on both sides, as this one would be, you have the issue of how do you hang it on the wall? Because then you're not like showing one side, so I think you have to buy 2.
Depends if you're in an optimistic or pessimistic mood.
That is a great one. That should be some sort of like mechanized program, like bad mood today, and everything just switches to relegation.
relegation scarf.
Yes. Well, not for the custom scarves, but if you wanted to get a US scarf or an MLS scarf or a USL scarf or an NCAA scarf or many others,
Yeah, they
you
also
could
have
do so.
all kinds of like national team ones that you wouldn't think of are available in the Roughneck Scarf store.
Yep, the first one that jumped to mind was
in.
Poland. I believe there's a Poland one in there,
Okay.
one or two at least. You can use the code Total Soccer Show for 20% off anything in the store at roughneckscarves.com.
Thank you to Roughneck Scarves for sponsoring today's show.
Yes, indeed. Thank you to Roughneck. So, should we get back to your plan, Mr. Grove?
My master plan for ProRel. Okay, so before the break, I was mentioning that some people may have concerns about my middle division, my ProRel Showcase Spotlight division. That's not what it's called.
No.
Because it was MLS East and MLS West, the Division 2 that's sitting below the National Division. And what if too many teams from the top division get relegated and they're all from the East Coast? Do you overload MLS East and have an imbalance, with MLS West? And the answer is no. The answer is that you sort of not redraw the map, but you may have to just rearrange a couple teams.
Okay.
So if there are too many teams end up in the East, then some of the teams that are in the centre or towards the centre of the country that are also in the East get shifted over to the West, which sounds wacky, but it is a thing that literally happened in regular old Major League Soccer, right?
Yeah.
Like Sporting KC or Houston or maybe both have at some point switched back and forth between Eastern and Western conferences because they are neither East nor West.
Well, yes, that's true, except that didn't happen annually, which is kind of what you're getting at here, is that you are going to have to maybe adjust who's in what conference every year, which I think...
So I should tear up my plan?
Well, no, it's just more so like I could see that you're going to have more provisions for, say, a budget. That if you're now moving a team who's like maybe right on the verge of being in the Eastern Conference, now you're putting them in the West, that means more travel for them. That means you're probably going to have to maybe have more provisions in there to help them with that travel.
Okay, so grease the wheels a little bit.
Well, no, I think it's just more so like you have to, if you're going to suddenly throw a team and then increase their operations budget, you kind of have to like, you can't just be like, deal with it because somebody else was bad last season. You've got to kind of help them make that a possibility.
Okay, will do.
All right.
Will do.
But I also think, while that does sound kind of crazy, if you look at the way USL has been in the past couple of seasons, there is so much fluidity in terms of expansion franchises coming in, MLS2 teams coming in, teams from
Tampa Bay coming over, right?
Yeah,
they came from
Ottawa,
NASL to USL.
Ottawa as well. Yep. So you do have that fluidity on a season-by-season basis. You just don't tend to see it in Major League Soccer, but you do in the lower divisions, so it's kind of representative.
So my version would actually be more stable than the current version where teams are sort of folding and disappearing and coming in and going.
Sure.
That's me selling it.
It's a bold statement.
That's me selling it. So the other part of this is what do we do about making sure that everybody stays in business, right? Because one of the things I want to say like about Major League Soccer, or at least we mentioned this at the top of the show, one of the things you have to respect Major League Soccer for is that in a country where previously whole leagues had gone bust and disappeared and soccer had sort of gone under as a professional business, MLS put together this wacky sort of Rube Goldberg contraption that spat out soccer through complicated means, but did it with such sort of control on spending that everybody stayed in business more or less. Right. The league at least made sure it stayed in business through single entity and through salary cap and all that stuff.
I agree with you like 90%, but I would add that there have been those franchises that have gone under that no longer exist. So there have been some
survived, right? Soccer, professional soccer in the United States survived for the longest it ever has done. A league survived.
This is very true. Yeah. I think it's just that when I saw like the different perspectives, because again, everybody has their bias. If you're pro MLS, then you tend to be sort of like MLS is doing great. We don't need pro rel. And I think with that comes this idea like, hey, look, MLS has never done anything wrong. The NASL has folded. Like that's a big problem. And it's like, well, you guys have done some stuff wrong.
Doesn't that represent where we are, right? We're in the middle.
Yeah.
We want soccer to succeed. Yeah. I think MLS has at least done a thing where soccer has happened, right?
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, with my new league, I want it to be a more open structure. Part of the bargain with Major League Soccer is we're going to call this thing Major League Soccer. You get the branding, right? You are still the operation that absorbs the other leagues. In exchange, we are opening this up.
Yep.
The clubs are now clubs. They are not franchises of Major League Soccer. Sporting KC is an independent club. If someone puts a bid in for a Sporting KC player, or if you're New York Red Bull, someone puts a bid in for Tyler Adams, one mention per show, you have to sell him. The club can sell him. The league doesn't get a say. Okay. Right? Each club is an individual thing. At the same time, one of the sort of good and bad things about MLS is that all the players have got paid, right? Maybe not as much as they wanted, but there were spending controls and there were paychecks always arrived as far as I understand it. So what I would like to do at the top couple of divisions is a sort of faux single entity, right? Where the clubs are independent, they are not franchises, but the league can set a salary, like I want to call it a salary cap, but also a salary guarantee, right? So the money that comes in from TV revenue sponsors, whatever, they take a total amount of money and they say, this is how much we can afford to guarantee from the league to the teams on wages, and here is your cap.
Okay. Yeah. Why do you have to get rid of the franchise aspect of this in order to make it work? Like, why couldn't you just keep that?
Well,
but tweak the rules?
Because then it's single entity, right? Then it's a whole different thing where the league has too much control over the various teams, and they could move, say, a team from Columbus to Austin.
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying?
That, yeah.
Right. So we don't want that happening. What I would do with that, so I don't want to call it a salary cap exactly. It's like a salary guarantee. If you get to the top division, there's a certain amount of money that is available for salary, which means that is there for the teams to spend, right? If you're a wealthy owner, you can then spend above that if you want. And it's not like you only get 3 DPs or this and that. It's not as complicated as targeted allocation money and all that. It's just you can spend above the guarantee out of your own pocket as long as you pay a luxury tax. I did it. It's a luxury tax system back to a fund in the league that is then distributed to the other teams and can be spent on the wages and transfer fees for young American players, domestic players, also Canadian players, because they count as domestic. I'm keeping some Canadian teams in this system.
That makes sense.
So the reason I want to do this is like when you get a Giovinco at Toronto, for example, maybe it's pick an American team. Say the LA Galaxy get a big new name signing and they're paying him $7 million a year. I want like 10% of that to then be put into this fund, and it's then distributed among the other teams to spend on American players.
So it sounds like you're getting rid of a lot of like the kind of fundamental operational structure of Major League Soccer, but you're allowing them to kind of keep the bells and whistles almost, or like the decorations.
Well, this is me looking at the opening up of the system as also an opportunity to promote the things within not promotion relegation type, to incentivize the things I want within the system.
Yeah.
Right. So a luxury tax above the salary cap of not too much, right? It's not punitive. It's just kind of, you got to pay your fair share kind of thing. And then that goes towards funding domestic players so that money is available for young Americans, right? And then here's the cherry on top. The amount of the share that the other teams get of that luxury tax money is dependent on how many domestic players or Americans they field in terms of minutes, right? So if your total minutes of Americans that you've played is higher, then you get a bigger percentage of that luxury tax pie.
Right.
So everyone's incentivized to play Americans, but no one is forced to do it.
Right. And then I think maybe the criticism there becomes, but then don't American players become kind of like arbitrarily valued, or aren't they too like expensive?
No, I don't think so, because I think that my conception of this is it's different than saying you must start 5 Americans and then there's like 2 or 3 getting a start because they don't, even though they don't deserve it.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
But I would also say
there's a much softer version of that, which doesn't guarantee anyone a starting spot.
Right. But I would also say it does incentivize like spending more on the like top tier U.S. talent, but it also means that you can spend more on developing young talent or kind of really poaching the ones from your more like regional competitions and think, I can get this kid for cheap. He's an American. He can go in there. We'll see what he does. If it doesn't work out, I can go get another American.
And maybe all this money also sort of, I don't really like the phrase, but trickles down to like if you're playing Americans in the sort of second division, or if you're playing Americans in that regional, local division, you're still getting a share of the luxury tax fund. And maybe just even some of the corporate income that comes to the top division can be then shared downwards to those other teams and incentivized towards playing young Americans.
That all makes sense to me. I'm still having a hard time, and maybe and it's fine for you just to say like, yeah, I'm not worried about it. We have to do pro rel. We've made that stipulation, so it's happening. I'm still having a hard time believing that the owners of Major League Soccer would really embrace this, because you're basically forcing a decent amount of them to drop down to a lower division.
Yes, I am.
And you're sort of taking away some of the checks and balances, because a lot of times you would just assume like, oh no, teams want to spend more money to get better players, to win more titles. But it does seem like there are at least a few Major League Soccer franchises who are very happy to spend the minimum to operate on a very limited budget to keep themselves kind of going. So suddenly
they can't do that. I mean, that's why I love this. The idea of this system, right, is to make sure everybody has to be on their toes all the time, or you're getting relegated, or you're not getting promoted, and all that stuff.
So, but really, like, and I don't mean this in like a sort of mocking way, but really, like, your plan is a little bit, look, you're keeping your branding, get on board. It's a little bit like you're sort of forcing them to accept that, yeah, we're changing things up and you're just going to have to be okay with it, but you still get to keep your franchise name.
Well, the argument I would try to make to them is like, we can make more money this way altogether. Like with the Pro Rel Division 2 spotlight should be full of drama and excitement. There'll be more clubs spread throughout the country. Soccer as a whole grows. I mean, this is kind of an argument I can't prove, right? But so I can't put this down on paper and say it will grow by X if we do this. This is about either making the argument to owners.
Yeah, but I prefer you do what you're doing though, because I feel like sometimes there are those. you'll see those at times when you see a person arguing in favor or against, that it will be like, and also it's going to triple in value. And it's like, that's not based on anything.
I'm not prepared to say anything like that. But you can make the pitch that hopefully it does, right? You can do that. You really can do that honestly. But then at the same time, I'm trying to keep some of the structures of MLS in place to make sure that the league is guaranteeing certain things, right? So if you don't want to spend any money on your team, you can kind of just take the league minimum salary and field a team with that.
Yeah.
You'll probably get relegated, but you're welcome to try.
You never know, man. You never know.
So I mean, that's pretty much my whole plan. You got any other questions before we move on to your less good plan? I'm joking. Actually, I don't want to set up an adversarial plan versus
Too late.
plan
It's
thing.
done. We're no longer friends. No, I mean, I think the thing that I enjoy the most about your plan is really when it comes to that, like the second division, the East and West, that it basically keeps a lot of the kind of infrastructure we already have in place, but I would say it improves it and it puts a spotlight on it more so because, as you said, you've got all that competition. So essentially,
the thing I really dislike is like mid-table teams or lower-table teams sort of just coasting through the season. I think if there's promotion is possible and relegation is always possible when you're in the middle because of the smaller divisions, like 14 teams, then I think everybody's always on their toes.
Yeah,
right. I would go and watch. I mean, we go to every Richmond Kickers game because we're doing the commentary. But as a fan, I would go to more Richmond Kickers games if there was really something on the line. Like if we lose on Saturday, we drop into the bottom three.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or we win on Saturday, we go into the top three and we're looking at going to MLS National.
Because I think at the end of the day, what all of this is based on.
Or I'd watch it on TV, right? So there's higher TV ratings, local TV.
I mean, as long as you're getting it. But I think what I would go back to, though, is this idea that I think because we haven't had promotion relegation in this country, I think a lot of people who are who
just
have
never experienced it.
Not that I can recall,
right?
But I think a lot of people are fans of the Premier League or the Bundesliga. They've chosen their teams, and and it tends to be they choose the bigger teams, myself very much included. And if Manchester United were to be relegated, it would be disastrous because something has gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But it also means much harder to watch them on TV. There's more of a stigma. Whereas I think in England, if your local team gets relegated, tickets get a little bit cheaper. You can see them more often. And
Wolves tickets went down.
Yeah, and so it becomes a thing that, like, maybe it is a little bit more exciting. And I think if you look at it from an American perspective, then you still have that pathway to get back to the top tier. So you can still bring in that kind of star talent if you want to, or maybe some of the players who aren't quite on that top tier, you can bring them in, but there's reason for them to come because they might get back. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, they've got a really exciting young American and this kind of guy who played for Bayern Munich for 10 seasons. I want to go watch them.
Here's the thing you don't see enough of in the United States either is players who are playing in like the second or third division getting picked up and signed by the top division, right? In this new system where it's all one and it's open, so you have to like literally do transfers like buy a player. I honestly can see that happening, right? You'd have a team in MLS National that's struggling for goals. Where do they go, right? They can either right now they have to move around allocation money and do some trading and it all gets really complicated and messy and you've got to give up some pieces to get some pieces. But instead here, what you do is you look who's scoring a bunch of goals in MLS West, right?
Yeah.
How much can I bid for them that they will accept the offer and we'll give this guy a try up here? Or maybe there's a guy in MLS local Northeast who's banging in just endless goals, right? You could put in a bid that's probably not that much because it would mean a lot to that club to get, I don't know, $200,000. And you could get that guy and just see, oh, wow, this is like an undiscovered gem. I really do think there's a lot of undiscovered gems in the United States that don't get a chance to play because there's not enough teams for them to play on. And because the system is so convoluted that it's really hard to get into.
Yeah. I would say one quick add on there would be that I don't think there's not enough teams. I think there's not enough motivation to play for those teams because at the end of the day, if you're playing for a USL team or an NPSL team, the salary's not that high.
Yeah.
There is really no chance that you're going to be moving up with that team. So it sort of is like, maybe I'll go work in a hotel or maybe I'll try to go abroad. But it doesn't really keep you going there, whereas maybe if you stay there, there is that opportunity for you to move up to eventually be MLS 2 or MLS West or whatever you want to go with.
MLS East and West.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. MLS East and West is second division. MLS National is the top division. MLS Local is the regional divisions at the bottom. Final thing I want to add before we move on that I sort of forgot to put in my pitch. I would also license it Bundesliga style, Das Reboot style, where one of the things that you need to sort of go through these divisions, especially maybe from the second division upwards, you must have a development academy that you are funding in some way, or you must be connected to a development academy. So I want to make that link between sort of youth players coming through and getting to possibly play for these teams.
So one actually one thing we haven't really touched upon that I can recall, at least, is money. Because it does seem like you've got a lot of plans for like making people have development academies, making sure that people can stay afloat.
Yeah.
But how are you making sure that those clubs have money in the first
don't worry,
place?
all the new sponsors will cover it.
Okay.
It's a thing it would be the easy thing to say. Right? Here's the thing. There's a chance that if we implemented my system, and you have like the guaranteed salaries that are a certain level in the national division and are lower in the second divisions, right? Say it's the current, like it's like $8 million, which is what, if you add all the TAM and GAM and basic salary cap, say that's what you're guaranteed in the top division, and say it's 4 or 5 million in the second division, there's a chance that the actual standard of soccer declines. You know what I mean? It may not be as good to look at on the field because you'd be getting fewer players getting paid that much money because teams have to make savings. I'm willing to sort of take that risk and not worry about it.
Right. And I would also add then that
for the long term gain, right?
It is also the case that if you are a franchise who maybe plays their way up and suddenly is in MLS East, like you also
in the second division for those who are following.
And if your goal is to make it to the top division, like that is probably, you could spend a little bit more. I'm assuming then you still have not that salary cap, but the luxury tax in place that would be spread out. But you can then spend more money, get yourself promoted, and it's probably cheaper than a $150 million expansion fee.
Yes, it definitely is.
There we go.
We haven't really talked about expansion fees, right? I'm hoping maybe we'll talk about it in your proposal.
Somewhat. I mean, because that is
kind of skipped over it.
That is always the like inhibiting obstacle. Which I don't know. I mean, should we talk about it now because it does kind of factor into both of ours. Like
okay.
you have to deal with that, and that's again where I go back to. I think it's going to be difficult to get MLS owners on board with that plan because you aren't sort of compensating them for a lot of the investment and time put into it. Because, yes, like Columbus, D.C. didn't have to spend that massive expansion fee, but they've been operating for 21 years at this point. So you kind of got to reward them, and then you've got the other franchises that have spent that money.
So how do you want to talk about it?
Well, I honestly think it probably, first of all, is worth looking at those expansion fees for a second because I think they're not – as ludicrous as this is about to sound, so bear with me, they are not as ridiculous as people think, or they're not as big of a problem. Because, I mean, really, if you go back to, say, Montreal, 2012, they were added in. That was a $40 million expansion. Really, it jumps up with like NYCFC in Orlando at $100 million.
2015?
2015, yeah. That's when we jumped to $100 million.
Right.
And so you're really looking at some of like the franchises that have come in later on as the ones who've been like having to put forth that.
I would say, I don't know if this is the thing you're already thinking, but I would say that they don't pay all up front, right? So they haven't spent it all yet, right? They've just paid it like a percentage each year, I would say. It's like a season-on-season fee.
Right.
Yeah.
So mine gets around that a little bit. I'm curious. So do you have any way, or are you just like, thanks, guys, we really appreciate that you spent that money?
I would sort of, the gift would be giving them their team. You give them their team. I've kind of just come up with this on the fly, but as single entity is devolved, the guys who sort of put the money in to buy an expansion fee, instead of now getting a franchise of Major League Soccer, they have their own team.
Okay.
They have an actual club. You say, you now own this whole thing.
And what happens then when that team who spent $150 million and owns that club gets relegated to MLS West or East?
Then they devalue their own investment.
Okay. Fair enough. So then should we move to my plan?
Yes.
So I have tried to take a more, not that yours wasn't, but like I have gone a very practical route. I have not been like, we're going to blow up the whole system and it's going to be
mine was an attempt to not blow up the whole system, but to get
and I'm saying, like, I'm not saying yours was, but I have definitely tried to take a more, even if like FIFA is putting a gun to our head and saying you have to institute pro rel, I'm still trying to do it in a way that I think is most amenable to the people that do not want this to happen, specifically MLS owners. And specifically the ones who've spent a lot of money.
So how do you deal with it then?
So I think you're looking at MLS right now, you've got the 22 teams, soon to be 24, soon to be 26. And I think really maybe you could expand it to 28 through that expansion fee, although it probably
There's enough interest.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense with my plan to stop at those 26 because you've already got that. And then basically my idea is that you kind of set up the overlying infrastructure before you really get to the pro rel aspect. But essentially, say we're going to start this whole league in like 2032 is what I'm going to go with. We're going to Like in 20, so you've got 26 MLS teams between now and then that kind of come into operation. They have time. You can keep increasing the salary cap. You can institute the luxury tax if you want to do that. But you really put these franchises in a super strong position.
Okay.
Then if
so you let them fatten up, essentially.
Basically, yeah. And then if we're going to start in 2032 with 26 franchises, I'm going to say in 2028 is where we start having actual just promotion. So if you win, if you win the tournament that I'm going to propose, you become the 27th franchise and the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th until eventually we have 30 teams in your top tier.
What does the tournament look like?
Okay, well, let me get to that in a second because my idea here is basically...
Oh, I noticed you're just skipping away. I had to answer your questions.
Well, okay, then I'll do that. Because basically mine is the idea that kind of what you had with MLS Local, it's more based on almost like a... I'm going to go college football, even though it's college in general. A college football model of you basically have conferences.
Okay.
And you have 6 to 8 regional conferences. So the easiest one I would say would be, like for purposes of what I want to talk about, would be like the Southeast Conference. And that would be, say, Richmond, North Carolina FC, the Charleston Battery, Atlanta United 2, or Gwinnett FC. Miami FC, Tampa Bay, etc. Those franchises are kind of in the Southeast Division. They all play each other.
So this is a USL, NASL kind of, just agree that this is what we're doing instead. We're doing regional conferences.
I'm getting rid of USL and NASL.
Okay.
I think a huge...
Can we call it a merger and then they change the name and join some of this?
You can do that, but I honestly think, and if it offends people, it offends people, I think a huge problem with Pro-Rel is that people... I think I've already said this, but to say it again, like have a vested interest in their league or team. And as a result, I want Pro-Rel, but I want it to be an ASL. Like you kind of have that background, and I think that causes problems.
I want things that benefit the kickers.
Yeah.
In the USL versus NASL war, which is I guess, what Kartik called it, right? The soccer wars. I kind of find myself leaning towards USL, and I have to keep checking myself and being aware that I'm biased for that reason.
Yeah,
so I get why people.
And I think we
way.
both are, but I also do believe that there are certain NASL franchises that want to be the dominant league. They want to be the top tier, and I think if you said, hey, you're going to be the second tier officially, and that's how it's always going to be, I'm not sure they would be okay with that in the first place, and I think it causes problems. So I'm saying we get rid of it, and we've just got conferences now.
Gone.
Yeah, and basically, so say, as much as I would like to say it's Richmond, we'll go with Charleston. Say Charleston win the Southeast, then basically
Congrats, Battery.
You have a 6-team, you could do round robin, you could do any number of things, but basically each conference winner from around the country plays each other, and I would really, again, I'm trying to make it as amenable as possible to those MLS franchises. Whoever wins that tournament, they go up, and one team from MLS goes down. You could even make that a home and home playoff if you wanted to.
So you start with there's a champion from the regional conferences, and then there's a playoff against the
other champions.
So once you have the champion of that, then they have a playoff against the MLS team that's in danger of being relegated. So it's a one last chance for the MLS team.
If you wanted to do that, but I think it's still the problem then becomes that, say, this season, if the Galaxy were the last place team and they got relegated, it's really difficult then for them to get back up. That is the issue that you're going to face. So I think it probably has to be a little bit more just if you win that one, you replace the bottom team, and that's that.
Okay. Oh, wait, can I backtrack a bit? Didn't you first start saying that it's promotion only?
Yeah.
So the first couple of seasons of your conference version thing, you just have the conference playoff or round robin at the end, and that champion just essentially becomes an MLS expansion.
You got it.
Franchise, and no one comes down.
Nope.
So you're filling out the league. What number do you get to?
30.
So once you get to 30, that's it. Then the next year after that, it's Pro-Rel.
I think, that's what I'm going with. And maybe you could do 32 and have 2 conferences if you want to go that way. I'm leaving a lot of it.
You go promotion for a little bit.
Essentially, to get everybody up there, to get everybody on board, to allow everybody to have a little bit of investment before you start.
And let those expansion fee payers get fatter.
Exactly. That really is kind of it, is that you're saying, look, now you've got this leg up because you spent all that money. You're in a position where now you can keep investing, build your academy out, be in a position where it's going to be really difficult for you to get relegated. You're essentially an Everton in that situation. That it's not guaranteeing that you're going to win, but you're in a very strong position when you're coming up against Brighton, for example.
As long as you hire Sam Allardyce.
Well, there's that. Yes. And so, but I really think the part that I like the most is the regional conferences, because essentially you can sort of let them run themselves with MLS oversight. MLS can say this is how we think you should spend the money that we're going to be giving you, but it's kind of up to you. You can control then how many divisions you have in your respective conference. So that Southeast, you could have 10 top teams, 10 underneath, 20 underneath that.
It's similar to my idea, right? You can go as deep as you want at that local level. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then I think with that comes, like, there is sort of a revenue sharing aspect where, so say you've got the Southwest, which is like
That's your
California,
conference.
Arizona, whatever else you want to put in there, and say it is the Galaxy who get relegated, you could say, like, as a parachute payment. So usually, as like a hypothetical, each conference is going to get $20 million to spread amongst their teams. This year, because the Galaxy,
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm just okay. Fine, $10 million.
Okay.
Like then, but this year, because the Galaxy are going back to the Southwest, the Southwest gets $13 million. $3 million of which is allotted for the Galaxy, plus whatever would be their usual.
It's kind of a little
allotments.
Parachute payment.
Essentially.
It's not the Premier League gigantic golden parachute payment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But
So you're then incentivizing the relegated MLS team to be able, not incentivizing, helping them to be able to get promoted once again.
Yes.
One question I have is your MLS top division still single entity?
I see, and this is where I would openly admit that I do not know enough to really be able to say yes or no, because like I would say yes, but a lot of the changes I would want to make might be impossible under single entity.
Like legally and contractually.
Yeah, basically, because like I think a huge part of it should be that MLS would, in my model, like the top division would still get a percentage of a transfer fee, but say the Richmond Kickers want to sell one of their players, maybe the Kickers keep. If you're like a lower division team, you keep 90%. If you're a top division team, you keep 80%. League gets that extra 10 or 20%, but then that gets redistributed to the lower divisions, to the individual conferences, to then be spread down to like the smallest team where they can get a little bit of money to help them work their way up the division.
All right, I have so many questions.
Sure.
But first, we have an advertiser.
That we do.
Today's show is sponsored by Away Days Football. Away Days Football sponsored, I want to say maybe a month ago, and got a huge response for the mystery kits.
I'd say, and justifiably so, because it is an incredibly cool concept. One that I have not yet undertaken myself, but I would like to, because it's basically, for, what is it, $25? You can get a kit from anywhere, really.
Basically, so you sign up, you get you just pay $25 for a mystery kit, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You do not know what it's going to be, and it gets shipped to you. And people have been really excited about opening them. I've seen some people sort of buying them each other for Christmas, that kind of stuff. It's a little late now. You might not be able to get it for Christmas. It can't be guaranteed.
No.
But we do have a new deal for you that Away Days Football have asked us to promote. First, I want to get my head around some of these mystery kits. From memory, from Twitter, because people have been tweeting their photos of mystery kit, I want to say Lille from France. I want to say Norgeland, where Jonathan Amon is. There's another American. Oh, Sheffield United.
There you go.
Sheffield United, while Cameron Carter-Vickers is there. That's a great mystery kit that I've seen some people get.
There's a PAOK in there. There's some other,
right?
There's a lot of like Scandinavian ones that I cannot remember and can even guess as to what league they're in, but they're all very interesting. And I love that people have used them for different like different ways. Basically, some people have used them as their football manager team. Some have like started career mode in FIFA with them. Some people just wear them. That's also fine.
You wear your garments. It's also worth remembering Away Days Football, even though the mystery kit is a great deal and really good fun, Away Days Football is an independent is how you pronounce that word, soccer clothing brand that has that great logo. It goes on hoodies and T-shirts and hats. Do you remember I said it was 2 soccer balls?
Yes.
And you said, actually, I think it's a soccer ball and a globe.
Yes.
You were right.
All right.
I took a second look. It's a soccer ball and a globe. It's a really nice graphic design.
It is indeed. And they also have a really nice package deal for you.
Yes.
Basically, if you spend $40 or more on an order, you'll be entered to win the official World Cup match ball, which is a $165 value. Basically, if you order a minimum of 2 mystery kits with the TSS discount, that puts you into eligibility.
Yeah, so it has to be $40 or more after the discount. I think that's worth highlighting so that nobody is confused. And that offer is valid for the next 5 days only. I really do think if you get a mystery kit and then you get sort of one of their T-shirts, I think you're onto a good thing there.
But also, I think one of my favorite things about it is like I do like the randomness of it, and I do like the idea of like it allows you to learn more about a team. But without the sort of like, oh yeah, I've always been a big fan of this club that I know nothing about, it does sort of remove that responsibility, because you can be like, no, it's a really cool thing. I signed up for it. They sent me a random jersey. I learned about that team.
So it removes the hipster aspect of it, because you've got a reason why you've got this. It's not like you're pretending to be a fan of Japanese football.
Yep. Exactly.
So that discount code you mentioned, Taylor, is Total Soccer Show. Code is TSS. TSS, 3 little letters, gets you 15% off at awaydaysfootball.com.
Thank you to Away Days for sponsoring today's program. Daryl Grove, are you ready to grill me on my promotion relegation plans?
I am. Okay. Here's my first question is, how does it work with 30-odd teams or 30 teams in your top division?
With difficulty, I think. I really do think that you're either
going to work on your pitch.
I think you're going to have to do one of two things. It's either going to be single table and you're playing everybody once, and that's it. Ooh. So basically, like if you're Seattle and you played Portland away this season, next season Portland are coming to town, and so it kind of my idea there would be that builds up the anticipation a little bit, because it doesn't, like, we used to be really excited about the Old Firm Derby, but then you'd have that happen like 10 times a season, and it takes away some of the majesty.
Yeah.
But the other easier option would probably be that you have two conferences. You basically then have like home and away against every single team in your conference. You maybe play a couple.
So Eastern Conference, Western Conference?
Yeah, and you have a couple against like the other conference, but it's very limited.
It's basically what MLS does right now.
Yeah, and then you have playoffs. Yeah, it's essentially that, except you still have the bottom of the table where you could have, your bottom two go into a playoff like against each other. So you have 4 teams in a playoff. The worst team ends up getting relegated. But the idea here is that it's the foundation.
That was going to be my question. So this isn't your final promotion relegation plan, right? Because it's basically just MLS with a couple of teams dropping out the bottom. Where's this leading to then?
I mean, it's leading to the idea that I think once you kind of get everything firmly established, everybody's on board, you start to modify it a little bit here and there. So it goes from 1 team getting relegated to 2 teams to 3 teams, and you've got 3 teams coming up. You could you could move the divisions around a little bit. You can move the numbers around a little bit as you go. I think the ultimate goal would probably to be more of a 20 teams in there, 19 games at home, 19 games away.
I see.
But I think that's too big of a jump, because to eliminate
straight
teams
from now to then,
straight from the top tier, I think that's too big of an obstacle.
The thing I really hope for with your plan is that those regional conferences become really successful and super competitive, because one of the things I like about ProRel is the idea that new teams will come into existence without expansion fees and all that stuff going on. Like just teams will spring up a little more easily, right? And some teams will be better organized than others, and the ones that are better organized will succeed. I really hope that within these conferences you'll get the chance for new teams to flourish, right? So you said Richmond, Charleston. I mean, there are other cities in the region, right? Virginia Beach could have a team.
I mean, and the other thing would be that also you could have another New York franchise. You could have another Atlanta franchise. Like you could still have more of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be immediate competition, an immediate threat to the market.
Kingston Stockade would be a good sort of candidate in the Northeast division, right? Because they're in upstate-ish New York, I want to say. This is Dennis Crowley's team. We talked to him on the show.
So. I think they're not far outside of.
Okay, they're not in New York City. Put it that way. So that would be a good candidate for a really well-run team that has a shot at promotion to Major League Soccer, but is by no means guaranteed.
No, and I think I would have like rules in place where if you are an expansion franchise in like the lowest tier, because that's where you got to start, that maybe you don't get any sort of financial assistance for the first couple seasons, but you still have to abide by the rules.
You've got to prove that you know how everything works.
Yeah, because what you don't want to do is basically have a system where it's like free money. If you join up, if you create a random team, we'll give you $1 million. That ain't going to work. Certainly not $1 million either. So I think that's going to be part of it. But the other aspect that I really enjoy about the like smaller regional conferences is really you go the college football route, where you say you have 12 teams in that Southeast division. That's only going to be, say you do home and away, that's 22 games in a season. You then have room for out-of-conference games. So say it is the Galaxy get relegated and maybe they want to have a friendly against, or not a friendly, but like a non-conference game against the Cosmos, because that would be a crazy rivalry that would get a lot of attention. What's that?
For points?
I mean, not really. It's just more so like you could have that as like a win-loss thing, but it doesn't really affect your conference standing. It's just kind of games to get you more experience playing against different teams. You've got a little bit more marketing avenues there as well. But then you can end up going back to maybe the top 4 teams in the conference, have that sort of conference tournament. Whoever wins then goes to the larger tournament.
So I definitely get how this sort of solves the teams who've bought into MLS, the expansion fee problem, right? Because you basically protect it as much as you can while slowly, carefully introducing ProRel. Yeah, I'm very into that idea. What about the idea of youth development?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what then you'd have to go with is maybe the sort of like limitations of if you want to be in the top tier of your regional conference, so in the Southeast.
The Northeast Premier?
Or the Northeast Premier, there we go. Then you have to have like a development academy in place, or you have to have some relationship to a development academy. So you can either start your own, maybe there's already one operating in your city that you can kind of pair with when you launch a franchise.
That means Kingston Stockade have to invest, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the whole point, is that, and not necessarily, but only when they reach that like second tier sort of status, that's where if you want to get up there, and that's where you'd also have to have the sort of rules about like how like your stadium, I don't necessarily need a capacity, but it needs to be you're playing on a regulation size pitch with a decent access and all that good stuff.
My proposal as well was to be quite liberal with the sort of the requirements for sanctioning. So it's not like you must have a 20,000 seater stadium. It's more like your stadium has to be safe and no one can get hurt there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm going for, because my goal overall is that when you have it not necessarily hyper local but very local conferences, you then, like, if LA got relegated or if the Cosmos wanted to have like more games around the country, they could do that at their own dime, and they could go out and kind of make money that way, or they could not. And then if you're a smaller franchise, you can kind of focus on staying local. Maybe you play some smaller teams to kind of keep your team match fit, or you bring in some young players while you play against like a third division team.
You could put some effort into the US Open Cup.
There's also that, but basically by making it very limited in terms of the region, you then have far less in terms of travel costs, travel expenses, all that sort of operational budget issue.
Here's a major difference between our two plans. So I was picturing my MLS National, obviously there's a TV deal for that. My MLS Division 2, the East and West, with all the promotion relegation drama, I imagine a TV deal for that. My MLS Local, I'm not thinking so much as on television, except maybe locally, right?
Yeah.
So, but are you picturing with yours, because you've got big MLS, and then everything else is much smaller. You don't have like a middle division, right? Do you picture these conference games having a TV deal?
I think
so. I think you've got more chance of that when there isn't a middle division for companies to bid on.
I think so. You think you have more? Or
no,
less?
I think the conferences you're describing have a better chance in your system of getting a good TV deal because there isn't like a second division competing with them.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, my idea, I guess, would be that you probably have like local markets, like Comcast Sportsnet South maybe is going to be more interested. I mean, that's not ideal, but
I was hoping to push beIN Sports.
That's part of it. But like, I mean, that then you could also have, that's where like the MLS ownership sort of like entity that hangs over it all. Then you could have like, but we're going to have 3 games from this conference and 3 games from that conference and 3 games from this conference every month or something like that. And then you do still sort of get that national exposure while you still have a more local TV market and TV contract. And then obviously you get, a variety of teams coming to town. That helps you with your attendance as well.
I really think that those conference things would be way more exciting than the current system because there's something at stake.
Yeah, and I think it's also, like, in my mind, it's also the regional thing, that it helps build those intense rivalries. Because, like...
And then you can all hate the team that gets promoted to Major League Soccer.
That's what I'm saying.
You can all hate that team.
But it is the case that, like, because of the fluidity we talked about with USL, like, you definitely have... the old guard rivalry. That's definitely a thing in the United Soccer League.
It is, but I feel like it's marketed weirdly.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I also think like you have the rivalries where people don't like, say, FC Cincinnati, but I think that's a lot of that is out of jealousy because of how many tickets they're able to sell and like the strength they have immediately coming into the league.
So actually, this is a really good example. Like, here's what I think about rivalries. This is kind of a side topic, but it relates to your league, I think. I don't think leagues should ever market rivalries.
Really?
I think they should just be allowed to happen organically. I don't want to be told that, like, these, especially with MLS, there's a lot of, like, these teams contest the something cup, which isn't a real thing. It's kind of an invented rivalry. And the record in this is that, like, I think the kickers do this sometimes, right? We hear that this is the series between this team and that team, and no one actually cares as much, but it's just because you've called it a rivalry. And yet, Kickers Cincinnati became something of a rivalry.
Agreed.
Because there was kind of a set two with Coach Lee Cowlishaw and John Harkes and the Cincinnati fans, and Hugh Roberts scored that equaliser. And that has become an actual rivalry. I see the fans going back and forth on Twitter and Facebook, and there's a bit of a bite about those games. And yet, there's no marketing behind that because it's an organic thing, not something they've invented.
Yeah.
Right? So what I'm saying is, have these conferences that you're talking about, and don't go promoting the rivalries. Just let them develop organically. Let it happen.
The Washington professional football team and the Dallas Cowboys are not like... They're not just like, oh man, we hate Dallas. Like Washington doesn't just do that. Like that comes about because they've been in the same conference for so long that you have that sort of like familiarity breeds hatred, basically, or a
rivalry. Can we say rivalry?
A friendly respect, maybe. Yeah. But either way, like I think that would be a big part of it because I guess the argument would be that, like, oh, well, if you're a Southeast, you're not playing the Northwest, and then you, like, have limited exposure. But the reality is the kickers aren't doing that anyway because they can't really afford to do a West Coast swing or a very lengthy one. But it's also not like there's this long-standing rivalry between the Richmond Kickers and, like, Los Dos or anything like that.
Right.
The issue you might encounter is, say, DC United and the Galaxy got relegated. But that's where you could then schedule that sort of out-of-conference friendly that then allows you to still have those sort of long-standing rivalries incorporated.
Okay. So anything else on yours? I haven't got any more questions, I don't think. I think I've got what you're going for, basically.
I think the only thing that, like, this is my one that maybe I'm thinking of on the fly is if you go college football, you do probably have to have those non-conference games matter. So maybe it does come down to, like, there's also like a ranking or something like that.
You've mentioned those a few times, and I'm not as excited about those because you're basically just describing friendlies.
Yeah, and that's where I think that probably has to be incorporated somehow, that, like, maybe there is.
I think it's the penalty of being relegated is you don't get to play the big teams.
Well, no, but like, I would want it to be a little bit that you have that option. So maybe it just is that, like, that is incorporated into either your regional one, or maybe you could say, like, you keep a second division, like, top 10 poll, and, like, the top 2 teams are automatically in that tournament at, like, a higher level. And that actually works because if you have 6 divisions, I'm with it now. If you have 6 divisions, right?
Yeah.
You send
conferences, yeah,
6 conferences. Thank you. Then maybe, like, the 2 with, like, the highest ranking, those go automatically to, like, the knockout round, and then you have the 6 playing each other, maybe like that.
Maybe.
Don't get the buys. I don't know, something
like
that.
A college football ranking.
I'm just saying there are definitely wrinkles to be ironed out, but I like my plan overall.
That should be the title of the show.
Yeah.
There are definitely wrinkles to be ironed out.
There are.
In our pro rel plans.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of overlap between our 2 plans where we could sort of put them together?
Yeah, I mean,
because they're very different.
They are, but they're also not. Like, I think the biggest difference is just how many teams you have in the top tier. Because you could say, like, you could take yours and make that, like, yeah, like, mine isn't that dissimilar from having the 2 conferences and then MLS local underneath that. Like, you could definitely find some hybrid approach there.
Yeah.
But I also think that we have that
I want my
overlapping.
showcase for pro rel in D2, East-West.
That's all you
get
my
after
friend.
it.
But I think the idea of, like, the hyper local or very local conferences or markets where then you're emphasizing local development, I think that is a big overlap, and I think that's a key thing as to why we want Pro Rel, because you want the idea of a smaller team in Virginia or Georgia or wherever. I keep focusing on the Southeast because that's what I've been talking about, but you
it's
want...
just where you know as well, right?
Yeah, but you also... But that is to say that, like, maybe you do want a team in Bismarck, North Dakota who can then come in and, like you don't necessarily have to have this idea of, well, we want to be an MLS franchise one day, but you're not locked into being an NPSL team either.
Yep.
You can invest a little bit, and maybe you sell one of your players to Chicago, and then you use that money to invest and build infrastructure, and you slowly grow. But there is that opportunity for growth that maybe there isn't otherwise.
How about a system that does not involve Major League Soccer? What if there was, say, the situation where FIFA says, right, kind of gun to the head, you must have promotion relegation, US soccer, otherwise we're going to just desanction you. You can't even get the US men's national team or the US women's national team to compete in any of our FIFA tournaments. But MLS still says, no way. Single entity, no pro rel, get out of my face. What if you just blow it up and do it without them?
I mean, but at that point, I would say MLS ceases to exist.
Yeah, so US soccer just doesn't sanction MLS.
Yeah.
And you kind of just get rid of it. I'm talking about a situation where you really do blow up the whole system and you start from scratch, right? Could you just build kind of something similar with regional divisions, then slightly less regional divisions, and then a top division?
I think you could. I think it's
not overnight.
I think
right?
it's much harder, and I say that because while I do like Pro Rel and would like it to be implemented, I also understand why it wasn't from the outset, because I don't think Major League Soccer survives if you're starting in 1996 with the system of Pro Rel. When they tried, I mean, they wanted to start with 12 teams. They couldn't get enough interest, so they started with 10. When they expanded to 12, they had to contract to 10 again. Like, I don't think you could have been like, okay, nationwide program of Pro Rel, and we folded already because we have no money.
Yeah.
So I think if you did that, it's going to require a ton of oversight, and I don't know how you have that outside of maybe the U.S. Soccer president and like a Pro Rel board reestablishing everything like that. But I think you have to have some sort of foundational bedrock to spread off of.
And like it or not, that foundational bedrock kind of is Major League Soccer right now.
I think so,
it's about persuading them to change and get on board. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, I feel like we've set the beginnings of something here, at least in terms of plans.
Yeah.
That probably won't happen.
And I wish I could be more like idealistic about it. Like, I wish I could say
this must happen.
Well, no, more not even that, but more so like I wish I could say that everybody, like franchises would just be like, look, we're going to have like for the good of the game, we want to have promotion relegation. We're going to come together. We're going to have a bunch of people invest money for the good of growing soccer in this country. But the reality is, like, it's a business at the end of the day, and that's kind of where it is. So you're not going to get people just throwing in money. I mean,
he kind of did early
with
on.
Lamar Hunt. Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of people who have sacrificed a lot of money to make this thing viable.
I guess
right?
that's true.
Which is why we're paying a bit more respect to Major League Soccer than I'll bet some people would like.
Yeah, but I also think that coincides with there being nothing and kind of no alternative in the country. And now that there is and people have seen how much money there could be, I think it's really difficult to get a grassroots one off the ground. But I think like with the ones that we've established, you very much could. You could very much have like fan-owned, fan-operated clubs that work their way up and establish some sort of stability. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like we're going to hear about this show.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. With people, I mean, people will have things that they agree with that we just said. People will have things that they disagree with. I would say Taylor and I are big fans of civil discourse. So we'll be happy to sort of entertain any ideas or criticisms of our plans that sort of aren't personal attacks on us, but are sort of building on maybe the ideas we've mentioned here or alternatives to the ideas we've mentioned here.
Yeah, and I would say that like neither one of our ideas are like unique. I mean, lots of people, I think, have the, like, we should go college football conference approach. I'm not saying that was, like, unique vision on my part. And I also, with that, recognize that there are reasons why that would not work. But I think that, like, if when we do our show, it's not as though I throw out an idea and you're like, nope, not going to work. And that's the end of that. Like, so I do think what we would invite is an opportunity to, like, further the dialogue and be like, so this is the problem with your plan. And then investigating how that problem could be solved. I think that's more interesting to me.
I think I'd also recommend reading Peter Wilt's article, the Pro Rail Manifesto. It was published in Howler Magazine. It's also available online. Yes. You can read that online. But you should subscribe to Howler anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, before we close out the show, speaking of the future, which is what Pro Rail was all about, we've got some Scouting Network updates from the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network. Who you got, Taylor?
First one is Jared Morgenstern scouting Alphonso Davies, the 17-year-old Canadian winger for Vancouver.
We haven't heard from Jared about Alphonso for a while.
We have not. Davies was named the Canadian U17 Player of the Year, which was not really a surprise.
No kidding, right?
In addition, it has been reported that Jose Mourinho is keen to offer the youngster a trial at Manchester United. No word yet on whether or not Vancouver are interested in that offer or if the offer is actually real.
Okay, I guess we'll keep an eye on that then. Katie Bochenek is scouting Timothy Fosu-Mensah, 19-year-old Dutch defender at loan at Palace from Man United. After getting some game time due to injuries to other players, TFM went and injured himself. He picked up a hamstring injury in Tuesday's win against Watford and is out for an unspecified length of time. Thanks for the update, Katie. It's
not
bad
ideal.
News for TFM.
Yeah, not ideal. Zebu A scouting Lucero. I'm going to say Lucero, maybe Lucero. Cuevas, 21-year-old Mexican striker for Club America. After leading the Liga MX Femenil in goals during its inaugural Apertura season and being named to the team of the season, Cueva was called up for the first time by the Mexican national team for a pair of friendlies against Costa Rica. She made her debut in the second match, coming on as an 80th minute substitution in a 2-0 win. She made good darting runs and looked dangerous in the channels.
Lucero Cuevas. Benjamin Richards is scouting Efrain Alvarez, the 15-year-old Mexican youth international for LA Galaxy 2. Benjamin says, since the end of the USL season, Efrain has been training with the Mexican U15s and there hasn't been much else to report. He evidently recorded 2 assists in a 4-1 victory over the Sporting Cristal U17 side, thus helping resolve the age-old question, is the Mexican U15 team better than a Peruvian First Division U17 team?
Finally answered.
The answer is yes.
Finally, we got there. Final report, Dylan Veach scouting Kai Havertz, 18-year-old German attacking midfielder for Bayer Leverkusen. The name makes me laugh every time. Kai got a break from starting duties on Wednesday as Leverkusen continued their unbeaten streak with a 1-0 win over Werder Bremen. He still made an appearance in that match, subbing on in the 67th minute for Kevin Volland. Volland had been paired up front with Lucas Alario, and Kai came on as a like-for-like replacement in attack, but also to provide a bit more defensive cover in midfield to help close out the win.
Oh, Kai. Jared, Katie, Zebu, Benjamin, and Dylan, thank you for the scouting reports.
Indeed.
People have requested to know who their player is. I got your email this week. I'll be getting it to you over the weekend. I promise.
Indeed again.
If you'd like to join the Total Soccer Show and support us, it's totalsoccershow.com/join.
Indeed a third time.
We'll get you in the scouting network. One thing, sorry to send us back to this, but The Los Dos were mentioned earlier. Worth remembering that we didn't address that in the whole Pro-Rel thing. What do we do with all those MLS2 teams?
Oh, they're in mine. They're in those conferences.
They're in the conferences.
Yeah, I think the rule. Oh yeah, you're right. The idea that I had was that it's more like La Liga B. What is it? Segunda B. The Segunda division. No, Segunda B is
La
the
Liga
third division.
Segunda Division.
Yeah, Segunda division is the second one, where it's basically like Madrid B can compete in that one, but if they win, they will not get promoted.
Okay.
Like basically, you're kind of staying where you are, and the next place team comes. The other rule I would have is you kind of have to freeze those rosters except for for the transfer windows.
So you can't be sending your big players down to help with promotion relegation battles.
Yeah, or it just can't be like, we're going to add this guy this time. Like, because that is my one frustration. Well, I have several frustrations, but one of my big frustrations when you have an MLS2 side coming to play a USL side, like the Richmond Kickers playing like TFC2, you have no idea who's coming, and it's very much treated as we're just trying to get these guys minutes and see what they do.
Yep.
And I think to have one team that's approaching it with like, we're trying to win the league, we're very competitive, we're seasoned 28-year-old professionals versus
or even
17-year-olds.
Like the TFC2 program doesn't want to get relegated, right? So there'll be that aspect as well, that TFC2 needs to up its game a little bit.
Yep.
I've gone a similar way. I have that same rule where if you are a sort of a MLS2 or a reserve team, then you cannot be in the same division. You have to be one division lower than your parent team. But I would also, as part of my sort of end of single entity thing, I would give clubs like, say, Swope Park Rangers the option to just be an independent team, right? And you have some friendly links, but you'd have to have a separate ownership group from Sporting KC.
Yeah, I think that works.
And then like Seattle Sounders 2 and Timbers 2 would have the option to maybe rename so it's not so obvious, but also exist as an independent team.
And I would say if we're going to extend that option, I would extend it further to
Starfire, that's what the one team should be called. Because that's where the Seattle Sounders 2 team plays.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would say I would extend it further to be sort of like you could take the Real Madrid route and have your team competing in like the next highest division to keep those guys like as close as possible to the more senior team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they try that. If they get relegated, they do go down and not be in the Segunda.
This is true, but what I'm saying is the other option would be that you could also choose, if you're TFC2, you could say like, no, we want to be in the fourth tier. Like we want to be in the second highest one in the region, because that is more developmental, a la the Bundesliga, where you have like Dortmund 2 is playing in the fourth division of Germany,
right? Because
it's more about development than it is about winning that division.
I gotcha. Okay, so lots of Pro-Rel chat on today's show. Yep. We are taking tomorrow off. There will be no Friday show because we got tickets to see The Last Jedi. We're going to see Star Wars The Last Jedi. We kind of thought, what's the point of sort of running your own company if you can't give yourself the day off to see Star Wars?
This is true.
So that's why there'll be no separate Friday show. But
yeah, this is what's throwing me, because we are still putting out another episode.
Right, but we won't be recording an entirely fresh show.
Gotcha.
We will be, to sort of celebrate Star Wars, we'll be republishing our Star Wars 11 show. Our Star Wars 11 show will be with you sometime late on Friday. And I'm thinking a lot of people won't have heard it, right? Because we did it a couple of years ago, picked up a lot of new listeners since then. Even if you did hear it, you've probably forgotten it. I was quite proud of it. I thought we did a really good job. So I'll be happy to republish that for people to find.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I was just thrown for a minute because we began this episode with me suddenly seizing a 51-49 control of the Total Soccer show. So I was wondering if we'd ended with you seizing that back and being like, unilaterally, no show tomorrow. I've changed my mind.
70-30.
Oh, no. That's not good. You want to have a Gimlet situation here?
Taylor Rockwell, on that note, thank you for taking the time to talk promotion relegation with me.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again very soon.